Well, this is the morning brief. Yesterday it was chaotic at the airports here in Lagos and Abuja. We'll find out why and what exactly is behind the backstory causing this disruption and issues around TSA and all of that. I'm told that we should not go on break, so let's head to that conversation right away because we're absolutely pressed for time. So let's get to talk about it this hour because it was chaotic. I know some persons yesterday who had to travel from the Multiplicity International Airport, and their flights were delayed for many hours as a result of this protest, or well, some call it protest or disruption that played out right there at the Murtala Mohammed International Airport and in the airports in Abuja, Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport. Jeff?
Absolutely. So let's get talking. We have our guest right here in our Lagos studios. Captain Roland Yayi is the former managing director, Nigerian Airspace Management Agency and Board of Trustees member, Airline Operators of Nigeria. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me.
Also, Chris Aligbe is the former general manager, Public Affairs, Nigeria Airways, and also the chief CEO and chief consultant of Belgian Consult. Thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you, and good morning.
Let's begin with what exactly is behind it, because I read the presser from I think the NCAA to give a bit of a background to what happened. Nothing really to take away from, but the fact that there were issues, and then the union were actually invited to a meeting with the honorable minister. I guess he's not around, so because I know if he's around, we'll definitely see him. So they reported that in that presser. But what they were saying in that presser was that they had invited the union members to a meeting that they didn't show up. So what are give us a full picture of what we're dealing with here.
Okay, so essentially there was a meeting convened by the Honorable Minister. That meeting was to be between the unions and the airline operators of Nigeria. The unions were willing to attend, as a matter of fact, probably attended, but the AON decided that we will not attend because the issue that was meant to be discussed was premised on the ticket sales charge, which is a contractual obligation between the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority and the airlines. So the AON felt there was no basis to be sitting in conference with the unions to have a discussion on a matter they would not be able to resolve. That was the premise of the AON not attending that meeting. However, the root cause of this problem is a spike in the fuel price that we've seen since the beginning of the Iran-US conflict. In March of 2026, this year, fuel price around the world, Jet A1 fuel, spiked about 60 to 80% in other parts of the world. But in Nigeria, the spike was 270%. I mean, that's about 3 times the world average. Now, it's important to understand that fuel constitutes 40% of the operating expense of any airline operation. Now, that means that in just overnight, the fuel component of your operating cost trebled. That's 120%. At that point, airlines were already saying we can no longer sustain operations at these levels. Because, I mean, if you're not able to address all the other safety components of your operation, and everything you're doing is just selling tickets to buy fuel, it didn't make sense. So we sought to have audience with the president through the minister. The minister wasn't in the country when the AON had said that, look, there was a need to stop operations so at least we can address this pressing problem. The minister, got in touch with the AON and advised that we should please stand down that action. He was going to come in, convene meetings with the necessary parties and see how we could have some sort of resolution. Indeed, he convened meetings. The oil marketers were there. The NMDPRA was there. The AON was there. Unfortunately, those meetings could not resolve the issues. So the AON decided that there was a need to escalate the matter because this is a major problem. Because if the AON would down tools for one day, the entire economy in the country would now come to a screeching halt. So there was a need to have audience with the right parties to be able to resolve the issues. The airline came, put together a package that was necessary to allow for the stabilization of the industry. I have a document here which we've prepared since March, and this is August. The only way this resolution would have come is to have audience with the president. And we've tried very at different turns to see that we could get this audience and have this matter resolved. But it is yet unresolved. So we have a situation here where airlines, domestic airlines, are not in a position to be able to pay the 5% ticket sales charge to the NCA in a timely manner. Up until March of this year, domestic airlines were not owing, in the same quantum as we speak. I mean, it's a going concern. So at any point in time, there's some debt. So you have a 30 to 45-day window to resolve. In any case, since that's been the case, it's been very difficult for domestic airlines to be able to meet all the necessary obligations, operate the airlines, operate the operation safely, at the same time make payments to the NCAA. So the root cause of the problem, however you look at it, is the fact that the spike in fuel price worldwide, went to a point where in Nigeria it trebled, and that is beyond, what any airline, wherever in the world, can sustain.
Perhaps we should bring in Mr. Aligbe to the conversation as well. For what Captain is saying, Captain Yai, is that I think they want to seek audience with Mr. President. But it looks like perhaps the Minister of Aviation and Aerospace Development, Festus Keyamo, is putting some sort of barriers to their meeting with the president. I wonder why. And then that meeting that was held recently that you said perhaps it turned chaotic. Tell us about it.
Honestly speaking, I wouldn't know the conversation between AON and the minister or any other agent, because I'm not part of AON. Yeah. So the meeting, yes, I'm neutral. I'm not part of, yes, I'm not part of, I don't work in any of the agencies. So I'm just an industry stakeholder. I've been there for over 30 years, okay? So what I'm saying, the public hearing in Abuja, I was there in the public hearing. At that public hearing, the issue was the TSC, ticket sales charge. And I wasn't comfortable when I left, because the way it went, I quite didn't understand. I have never seen such a thing in the industry, where two top agencies of aviation of the industry are at each other's throat. And it had never happened before, and I didn't think it should be so.
That's the AON and...
No, NAMA and
NCAA.
Yes, that the two major agencies, well, FAN is there, but FAN is not part of this. So, the issue for them was the sharing ratio of the TSC. And I think a bill was already on ground saying it should be shared 40-40.
TSA meaning, for the purpose of the audience.
Okay, ticket sales charge is a 5%.
Yes, I wanted to
okay, is a 5% this impose on every ticket sold. Okay, the airlines are supposed to make it part of the ticket and then pay it to NCAA, remit it to NCAA. NCAA, now the sharing ratio would be applied. So in recent times, well, NCAA had complained, they were not paying, they're owing. I don't want to get involved in that kind of thing because I don't have the records. But the truth of it is that the sharing ratio is 20 years old. It was established 2006 by one of our best brains in the industry, Dr. Shehu Demure. But Shehu Demure had a vision. He knew what he was doing. We accepted it. The only thing is that Dr. Demure never claimed to have seen tomorrow. He didn't see tomorrow. Tomorrow is here. And tomorrow demands that these things has to be looked at again. The industry, both NCA and NAMA, they are in a very stressed position, financial stress. And so the issue of they wanting money for this or for that, asking for shares is one can understand. But if you get it 40-40, because what they are getting, the percentage two of them are getting is approximately 80%. The other 20% goes to agencies like NCAT, NIMET, and all those things. Now, but the present at the ratio is NCA 56% or thereabout, and NAMA 22%. And it's come to the point that NAMA says, sorry, this we cannot sustain our activities anymore. We are having a lot of things to do. And the former MD of NAMA is there, he knows the details of it. There are a lot of things to do, and we need money to do it. Otherwise, we will get into a problem. And the NCAA, the regulator, cannot get it done, because if the regulated does not have all that it takes to satisfy the demands of the regulator, the industry will suffer. Okay, now we have a catch-22. The NCA as a regulator, for me, NCA as a regulator needs to be, in terms of competence, needs to be maybe 1 or 2 steps ahead of the regulated. Because they must be able to say, sorry, you are not doing it well, you are doing it well. But the regulated also must be at the level that they can respond to any query by NCAA. So their training at that level is also sacrosanct. And NAMA is handling electronic equipment, whether a radio system, whether it's a navigational system, and these things need to be upgraded like computer. 10 years, they are obsolete. Okay, okay, would you want
just land on your thoughts?
Yes. Yeah. So what is the issue is the sharing ratio. But I think that all of us in the industry, even both the assembly, national assembly, they are not looking at, they are thinking about it as like a share, a cow meat. Make sure you have equal part. It doesn't go that way. But they are not looking at that place. Today, the government deducts 25-30% of revenue coming into all the agencies, all government parastatals agencies. NCAA is not a revenue generation agency. So it is wrong, it is not right that they should deduct 25-30% from NCAA. If government gives up, gets to zero deduction from NCAA, then funds will be released from the TSC, and the funds that will be released from the TSC will be added to NAMA. NAMA will have more funds, NCAA will have more funds.
So let me understand. Let me come to you, Captain. So there's a layer of NAMA and NCAA.
Yes.
There's the AON elements of this argument. There's also the unions. I don't know who they are backing now.
Okay, so
just hold on. So he's mentioned, I would like you to react to some of the things he said so that we can help the audience understand what we're talking about. So he says it's a catch-22 situation, and he's already proffering solutions, although he admits there's a catch-22 situation. So in addition to that, in reacting to what he said, you brought out the document. So I want to find out what is really affecting the industry based on what you have explained. Is it a cost-push pressure that is causing maybe margin compression for the industry, that they are not able to meet their obligations in that sense beyond what you've explained?
Okay, so I don't want to conflate issues. So there are issues here. The issue of what the unions did yesterday is separate and distinct from the issues.
Yes, that's why I
So the point here very simply is this. The 5% ticket sales charge was introduced when we had the Federal Civil Aviation Authority. The Federal Civil Aviation Authority at that time housed all these elements of the industry under one roof. The Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority, the Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria, Nigerian Airspace Management Agency, all of these entities were under the FCAA at the time when the 5% ticket sales charge was introduced. It is also important to note that at that time, there was a monopoly in the country. We had Nigeria Airways. Nigeria Airways was the only domestic airline operating in the entire country. Nigeria Airways did not pay 5% TSA. Okay? Now, we had only 2 million passengers flying in the entire ecosystem at the time. Predominantly, the 5% ticket sales charge came from international airlines. Okay? Now we had deregulation, and then we had a fray of domestic private entrepreneurs get into the fray. So this 5% ticket sales charge was applied in such a way that all domestic carriers now have to pay it. But importantly, it's important to note, when the Federal Civil Aviation Authority morphed to become the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority, the Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria, and the Nigerian Airspace Management Agencies, all these different agencies then introduced charges for their services independent of the 5%. Do you understand what I'm saying?
So that has pushed up the cost.
So right now we have a situation, and this is why the AON has talked about the multiplicity of taxes, duplicitous to a large extent, because you are charging 5%. The 5% originally was intended as a cost recovery for services of the FCAA. Now you have 3 different entities come out of the FCAA, and the 3 different entities have introduced separate charges for their services.
Yet, independent of the TSA.
Yet you sustain that 5% TSA.
Okay.
Now we recognize the fact that there is a paucity or a dearth of infrastructure in the airspace. There's a huge infrastructure deficit. So what we have said as AON is that the ad valorem model, which is a percentile model of this charge, is harmful to the growth of the industry. Why? Let me give you an example. If you buy a ticket, for instance, say 200,000 naira, you buy a ticket for say 300,000 naira, but both of you are on the same flight, right? 5% of 200,000, right, is 10,000. And in your case, you are looking at 15,000. Is it 15?
Yeah,
15,000 naira.
Yes, 16.
Okay, but you're on the same flight. The services you're taking and what he's taking is exactly the same, but you're paying differently. So essentially what that does is that it sort of disincentivizes the airline from being innovative. We talk about different airline models in other parts of the world, and we wonder why they don't work in Nigeria. Low-cost model. People buy tickets for about $5, and then of course the ancillary charges and stuff like that. In Nigeria, it can't work, because the model we operate as a government, does not encourage innovation. So what we are saying as AON is, recognizing the fact that we have infrastructure deficit in the country, there's a need to maintain a separate purse, which we would term or call the Aviation Development Fund. The 5% TSE you're charging right now, we're asking that should be removed and instead replaced with a flat fee, like you pay the passenger service charge, which fund does. So when you have that flat fee, let that money go into a purse to be termed the Aviation Development Fund. In that purse, you will have all the different entities have access. In the meantime, like Mr. Alibe said, there is a need for government to understand that the industry is dynamic. So when you say that everything aviation has to go into the TSA, whereas you pay monies into the TSA, and then of course you are not asking the monies to be returned for use. It becomes a challenge. So the deductions at source is a major handicap for the aviation agencies, because they're not able to provide services.
So we can squeeze in as many questions as possible. So perhaps you can walk us through what played out yesterday with the disruption. And then I'm also wondering, because the pushback from the NCA is that if you guys continue with this aggressive lobbying, you guys will be absorbed back to what it used to be. So I wonder perhaps if NAMA and the likes and other groups are ready to perhaps go back to what it used to be. But maybe you can also walk us through, propose perhaps a sharing formula of what you think globally works, and perhaps maybe that can also work here.
Okay, thank you. There is no global standard, but every country has their own. There are, let's say, a little bit, maybe a little bit from what Captain Roland is saying. The fact is that every country, there are in some countries, it's about 10%, countries are 7%, but they have their own mechanisms of everything. What our challenge is, and I say this that this money that we are talking about is not ticket fare. It is passenger. It is the passenger that pays it.
We carry out the burden.
You say yes, passenger pays it, and so what happens is that it should be automatically put into a pool. The airline should put into a pool. Sometimes there's something they call BSP through the banking system that these things. Yes. Okay, settlement plan, banking settlement plan, that airlines, this money goes into and then it goes to the agencies. Okay, but that at a point, maybe when the airlines started having some challenges, it was in place. They pulled out from it. Many airlines, one person pulled out, another person, and the other airline say we are not going to do that again. But the thing that affected the airline says the agencies should find a way of collecting the money. There's no other way of collecting the money. If the ticket, if the passengers pay. The only thing is that it should be an automated system where this is taken out so that the airlines won't be owing. And I agree with the airlines, they should not be the agent to this thing, but it should be an automated system.
So as soon as the money comes in,
yes, it goes into that pool.
So you're not indebted.
Yes, no interface with it, nothing. Nobody is accusing anybody of that. That's what I think. Airlines have the right to say we don't want to be an agent, but airlines have no right to hold the statutory passenger service charge. You can argue whether it is high or it's not high, but once the passenger has paid it, it should go into that automatically, go into that pool.
Maybe they can give the airlines incentive to say, instead of giving us 5%, take 1% from the collection.
Let me land.
Just land in 30 seconds.
Yes, okay. So what is happening is that when he goes in there, then he's shared. But what I'm saying is that the government should consider it not to deduct anything from NCAA funds. Once they don't deduct it, the issue is that whatever you add, if they stop deducting 30% or 20% from NCAA overall funds, it will release some funds. The funds will be much more than 40 or 45% of the TSC, thickness sand. And so they can now give a smaller portion of the TSC to NCAA to bring it to, while the other one is added to NAMA. Yeah. So that would be settled.
I like the conversation because there's a solution on the table. I don't know why these solutions are not being talked about. So we have only about 1 minute to go. So Captain, in closing, apparently we can't delve into what the unions are agitating for. Maybe you can comment on that. So what I see here is the issue of the sharing formula and the TSC and how it can be remodeled. I also see the issue of what I call the cost push pressure coming in from the aviation fuel and all of it. Maybe you put it omnibus for us way forward.
Okay, so essentially, as the AON, we had proactively looked at the possibilities of getting this whole thing resolved because we understand our role as a major infrastructure provider for the entire economy. We came up with a proposed remedial stabilization package to the government for the purpose of looking at what the issues are with fuel. That's the basis. If you address this and you can guarantee supply to a large extent, then the prices being fairly stable, then it leaves room for planning, which we don't have now. Two, you talked about the issue of merging NAMA back to FAN or whatever it is. That is absolutely not possible. Why? NAMA, NCAA, and FAN are...
Is it true the NCAA is proposing that?
Well, I mean,
or threatening that?
There's a video going around where purportedly the DG of the NCAA said he was going to issue a letter of investigation to NAMA because NAMA is saying they don't have enough funds to carry out their obligations. And he said he was going to... He may want to issue an LOI, but he's not in a position to say that NAMA will now be merged with FAN. He doesn't have that authority. There's an act establishing NAMA, there's an act establishing the NCAA, there's an act establishing FAN, except of course the lawmakers deem it fit.
Nice everybody.
To do that. So I mean, I would say that whatever he said there really does not carry any weight. In terms of the unions, The unions talked about three different things. They said, they were agitating for the TSC to be paid, or a particular airline wasn't unionizing, and whatever it is. The fact of the matter is that when you look at the videos we saw yesterday, Air Peace was picketed, but I did not see any Air Peace staff, there as part of a picket. So if the staff were agitating to be members of a union, I would expect to see them there. So I think that is this sort of a disingenuous way for the unions to just target Air Peace. Air Peace is the largest carrier. If you dislocate their operations in the domestic market, the entire economy can come to a screeching halt. It damages the industry, it damages the country, it damages our international outlook. So it's important for people to understand that you might say you want to cut your nose, you cut your nose to spite your face, so to speak. There is no way you will do any harm to Air Peace that you're not doing any harm to the entire industry. And as a matter of fact, even the NCAA, the 5% we're talking about, if the Air Peace is not flying, over 50% of your revenues domestically is gone. So what is the incentive to create a disruption so that the airline is not flying?
Captain, and apparently it's an ongoing conversation, but in all of this, I'm just thinking about how the prices can go down for those of us who fly.
As a matter of fact, if the airlines actually factor the cost of fuel, flights, most of the flights will be empty.
Yeah, I understand.
Beyond reach.
I understand. It's super expensive, depending on what time. But we must thank you both for coming on the program. We hope that the minister on his return will be able to put everybody in the room and the conversation can ensue, so we have a viable.
And we also like to hear from the NCAA as well. We reached out to them for perspectives as well to be on this topic.
Yes, well.
So please.
All right, so Captain Roland Iyayi is the former Managing Director, Nigerian Airspace Management Agency, also the Board of Trustees member, Airline Operators of Nigeria. We have Chris Aligbe, former General Manager, Public Affairs, Nigerian Airways, and Chief Executive Officer, also Chief Consultant, Belgian Consult. Thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate your insight. We'll keep touch base with you whenever it's necessary. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah.